Welcome, Kanchan. So lovely to see you here. And actually, before we even start, I wanted to mention that we had this technical problem, I think, with Restream. I'm hoping we're definitely live and we are on the right link. But if not, hopefully people will find us. And the most important thing is for you and I to have a beautiful conversation, which is what I'm so looking forward to.
As am I. And isn't it the way that it goes, where there's always one little small technical challenge that can get us, okay, we are very live. We are very human in our way of being. So absolutely, people will find us as they need to.
They would. And that's what's audacious about it in itself, is this just to stay and go with the flow, which is one of the intentions that we set out for today.
Absolutely. The
Be in the
uncertainty.
flow and have
Yeah.
fun. Yes. And talk about all things audacious. You and I were, talking about that and about the sort of 3 pillars of my book, which are courage, care, nonconformity. And I'd love for you to, introduce yourself with something audacious first, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. My mission, my work in the world is to up-level women of culture leaders into roles of influence. So that's been a really key baseline for me. And when I say the term women of culture, what I'm talking about is the culture that is outside of the dominant culture. So in North America, in the spaces I'm in corporate spaces that I'm in, that's predominantly white, male, cisgender, Christian. So it's outside of that culture, that dominant culture. So women of culture are more than the color of their skin. It is the traditions, the ways of being that we have been raised in, the values, et cetera, that have us showing up just slightly different than maybe the world that we're in. So my absolute bottom line is to up-level women of culture leaders. Now I do that in 2 ways. One is through them, the stream is through them. The other is through their leaders. Because you need to have 2 things running at the same time to really create a gateway of a courageous connection. So I work with both streams, and I call them streams because there is a lot in both areas. So thank you for asking. That is pretty audacious for me to just really be bold and be declarative. I've been doing it for a number of years, and I've really, I know I've seen the impact of something that I've done. So thank you.
Thank you. And I love that about you, actually, Kanchan, because it is, as you said, it's women of culture, which is what I know you for, and of course the leaders. And I'm curious to go down that, because you said, is that link of courage between the women of culture and their leaders. So tell me more.
So one of the key things is there is self-work, self in both streams, if you will. As a woman of culture, some of the work that we need to do is definitely maybe looking at some of the narratives that we've been raised in that maybe aren't working today in the world that you're in. The other is, how do I amplify who I am? That is, it's a lot more. It's so important because that is something that is opposite to the way that we have been possibly navigating our careers and getting to the positions. I'm fortunate enough to work with some very senior women leaders. They're in those positions because they have done a lot of work, literally the work to get to where they're at. Some of it is pretzeling, putting yourself into a pretzel to fit into other spaces. So how do we do our work as women of culture leaders is that we need to make sure that we also amplify who we are fully, unapologetically. So that's a piece of that. When it comes down to the connection and the courage, there is connection and courage that is needed for the leader to women of culture. A really powerful belief that people have is we need to have empathy. Yes, 100% we need to have empathy. The difference is the empathy is not for the other leader, the woman of culture leader. The empathy is for yourself as the leader to diverse women. part of that is because you're not going to have all the answers. I love in your book, one of the key things that you wrote, Alina, was about acknowledgement and to kind of know when you didn't know. And to me, that was so key when I work with leaders to women of cultures, is give yourself the empathy that you're going to be faced with possibly some ideas, some scenarios that you're not used to, and you're not going to get it right. And so it's really important to hold that empathy for yourself, first and foremost, because you can't give it to someone else if you haven't given it to yourself. It may be a surface empathy that you're giving to other people, but you need to hold it for yourself as you go forward. So those two self pieces are key bridges that need to be working simultaneously to be bridging that whole connection piece, the courage for connection.
I love that. And thank you, Kanchan. And you're right, the acknowledgement piece is really key, as in acknowledging what we know, acknowledging what we don't know, acknowledging our strengths, acknowledging our, what I call sort of edges or gaps. And when you sort of refer to the empathy piece, for me, that's also, I refer to that in the other A, in the chapter of advocacy, which I know for you and I is also a very, very, deep and subject, very close to our heart, because that's the caring part and advocating, self-advocating, but also advocating, in your case, for other women of culture.
Absolutely. The other portion for a leader, the other area, so one is the inward work, then the other is the external work. And advocacy is key for that, because partially what happens is we need to have an eye on the opportunities that may be available, that we don't just do sort of a blind put somebody in that we think, oh, this one will work, but really taking a moment to step back and hire people for potential versus, past history. Like who's got that advocacy is just so key. And that is so critical, especially for the leaders to women of culture, because that's a set of eyes that they may never be in those spaces to see what's going on or how that's happening. So absolutely, that's a really, and I love that about the book as well. And to be honest, and Alina, I probably have said it to you in some form, but I'll be so blatant as to say everything about your book is whether it's the layers to me as I reflect on myself, whether it is for the layers to the women of culture or their leaders, it is all in your book in a different format. And it's a really inviting way. It's so powerful because you have added tools to the end of the chapter. And I love that. If I haven't shown it to you, I love your book.
Thank you. This way, here we go. Thank you. Thank you.
The tools are really, really impactful. I mean, when I stop and I think about, one of the things that I love is about the assertiveness that's necessary. When I think of women of culture, the gift of being able to say no, learning how to say no, whether you've got to practice it in a mirror, is key. Because I can guarantee you that they got to their positions in leadership by saying yes to every single thing that others didn't want. And so it's like, oh, now I'm at a pivot point where I can actually look at the fact that I have to now go, oof, how do I say no to something? Can I say no to something? Is that even possible? So when I get to work with them, those are part of the tools that I also play with. So I love that you've captured a lot of that in your book.
Thank you, Kanchan. Actually, what you've just mentioned really touched me deeply, because that's probably I wouldn't say my most favorite chapter of the book, the assertiveness. It's probably the most challenging for me, because I am still challenged by saying no. Now, I am absolutely great at receiving no's. I can receive no after no after no. It's not a problem. But actually giving it's still a challenge. And for me, this, I'm on a mission to make no acceptable and accepted. Because for me, it's still, I'm a very much a yes girl. I lead with yes. That's sort of the previous chapter of assurance, which is, the courage to say yes. The the quote from Richard Branson, just say yes and find a way to then do it. After all, it's how I lived my life. And in the second half of my life is really learning that it's also acceptable to say no, not just constantly say yes.
And the power of the no. We are at choice at that point. We are stepping into choice. And I believe as leaders, for me, for the leaders I get to work with, that is in itself, when we're looking at when I'm looking at up-leveling to the position, to roles of influence, you need to know where your, as you say, non-negotiables are. Where is your non-negotiables? Where is this is a no, and it can be a respectful no. It's a no. This is what this is, and that in itself gives you just sit up a little straighter. You're holding yourself. Your feet are a bit more planted on the ground because you're at choice, and you're using your voice to activate that. And again, as a like you, I also, this isn't something that just has come to me. This is a practice. This is a practice even for me to understand I am a giver. So I like to give. I've always done it. That's actually probably what I hung my hat on for a number of years. I would say, yes, I would do this. And so for me to take a breath back and actually so far back, take a couple of breaths to figure out, what do I even want? I was so busy giving that I didn't even pause to think what I want. Now I have adult children. I have a grandchild. Like I'm not 20. And I'm also really mindful. That's a journey. I'm at a different place today than I was before. And it's still a journey for me to just sort of, what do I want? And those pieces of clarity are absolutely important for leadership. You need to know what you want, what you don't want. Those are the wants. Then the needs, the non-negotiables, are absolutely critical. The other piece I'm going to just jump in with is the non-negotiability. Is that even a word? About being vulnerable. I can do vulnerability. I can performatively do vulnerability. I can share one or two things because I know it's important as a leader. There's a difference of doing vulnerability and being vulnerable, which is putting myself in those positions that have of uncertainty, putting myself in the place of not being sure of where this is going to go, or uncomfortable spaces. That space of being vulnerable is very much connected to my having clarity about what I want and what I need. And it's really like it's dropped into another level for me as an individual. I see it as a leader. I see it with leaders, whether you're women of culture or their leaders. Like it's a really key piece. And I know that you touch on vulnerability as a really key piece as well.
Yes, and what's coming, up for me, absolutely in that sense, and but going back, that there's sort of, we admire vulnerability in other people. I think this is what Brené Brown was saying, but it's very difficult to just be vulnerable for our own selves. And as you were saying that my mind got a bit busy thinking, oh my God, Kanchan, but we're sort of vulnerable right now, as I'm not sure whether we are on the right stream. It's like,
yes,
it's just accepting the uncertainty there. I mean, I know we live, that there's no doubt, but I think for anybody who, hopefully you are on the right one. If not, we will make sure that gets shared in the right way. But that's sort of what came to mind. And as you were speaking, as serendipitously, and there is no serendipity or there is no coincidence as such. I was looking at this book earlier, and you just reminded me, because you just talked about it. And one of the things that Kasha says, and if I can find it, is, she defines power amongst many other things. But, the way she talks about power is that, power is, in her words, is when you ask someone or anyone for anything, and you are great at even the hardest no. So you accept even the hardest no with a sense of humor, a sense of persistence, and a sense of curiosity. And for me, that's one of the most powerful definitions of power. She has many others, but is this association with being okay to give and accept a no. And I'm curious, talking about curiosities, I know power is an important concept for you, and I'd love to explore that too.
Power has really shown up in probably the last year in terms of how I've had to pull it apart a little. Some of it was through my own experience, and talk about vulnerability is being put in a position where I was very aware of my relationship with power, partially because I would say it's been in my DNA as a woman of culture. There is a lot of power plays that I've had to navigate, for a variety of reasons. But there's a power with, power over.
Yes, I love that.
So power with is when you are able to work with, and as women as a whole, we are able to, for the most part, we do turn to work collectively, collaboratively as a power with. And then there's the power over, where it's very clear, decisive, this is what's going to, that thing. The interesting awareness that's really come forward with a lot of my clients has been, both are important. Mm-hmm. One isn't better than the other. It's a question of how we connect the two. And that comes back to who we are as a leader. Are we aware of when power with is important versus power over? There is a time where we do have to stop and go, okay, this is the decision that's being made. It's not just all about sitting and acquiescing to everyone. That can happen at times. Or you can get the power over in such a strong way that there is no voice that is heard, as it is. So it's the question of knowing when, as women of culture or as leaders, either or, when we are able to weave in both. The biggest thing is that leaning into power with, and there's enough research that talks about how important that is, leading with that is really key. It is important, and it's something that we do quite naturally as women of culture leaders, as women, I would say naturally, that's the norm. Now, the organizational culture may shift that because that's not what they want. They want this and they want it now, whatever. Like there is a separate world that one has to go into when you go into an organizational culture. The thing is, the beautiful thing is that is how we normally are. The piece that requires is that level of assertiveness to know when we have power over, when we are in a position where a decision has to be made. How do I make that decision quickly? How do I then take that decision? And again, this is where power with comes in again. How do I communicate that out to everyone? Where it's not done in a void, where we're just in a vacuum, it's done and then we move on. So the interesting thing around power with and power over, and Kanchan does it, she speaks so powerfully about it. I agree with you in the book. That is really key in navigating leadership as a whole. And I would say for women of culture, where I've spent a lot of time with my clients, is just accepting the fact that, wow, we have been either sat in the power with for so long, or there has been a massive assumption that you are timid, that you don't, you may not know whatever the assumption that, or the bias that's being made about you is also influencing how you are seen and how you are showing up as well, because, there's a variety of things. The beautiful thing is that the women that I get to work with, the senior women that I get to work with, have sort of earned their stripes in the work that they've done. It's now sort of the pivot point to go, okay, now how do you work with power and the power over together? That's the beautiful pivot point.
Oh, I love that. And actually, again, sort of the power with and the power over is almost like, for me, is the courage and the care in a completely different way. It's a different language. But, when power with, it is because us as women, we are much more collaborative. And maybe that's a generalization, but it sort of feels more comfortable to do it with, to partner up with people, to collaborate with, where as you said, the sort of power over is we suddenly go into the power and get more into the assertiveness part, is what do I say no to? Because when we're very clear as to what we say no to, or when we're very clear as to what we don't want, we become even clearer as to what we want and what we want to say yes to. And that dance, it's a beautiful dance if you can master it.
And we have the beautiful gift. So there was, I'm going to go back at least 10 years ago, there was an Athena doctrine that spoke about, I think they interviewed, I can't even remember, the tens of thousands of leaders across the globe to see what were the qualities that were required, wanted for a leader. And every one of them not gender, but feminine, masculine is how they broke it out to, not gender-based, but every one of them were feminine qualities, except for one, which was vision. That was as a male. That women did not hold that, but the women, the feminine quality was not seen in that. But the whole thing about collaboration was absolutely key in terms of, and it's interesting, even as I'm speaking about this and I talk about vulnerability, I'm like, oh, I think I'm absolutely butchering what I was trying to say right now, which is right. I think there was probably a bit more of an articulate way of saying that. And we're live. So this is what we get to do. We get to step into it and say, there's a piece in here, there's got some truth to it.
Oh, I love that. And you remind me, I mean, Tatiana and I, who, we actually did last week, we did a workshop on this very, very topic of competition versus collaboration. Right. Because I know, I mean, again, there is a lot of science and there is a lot of research. Collaboration is absolutely critical and not to be overused, because, you still have to have that competitive spirit to be able to really perform at your best. So not forgetting that competition at the right time in the right space, certainly it's still important when you're competing for the best idea, and it's easy to go one way or the other. And you said it's having the courage to dance on that spectrum and use the various different tools that are available to us.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I would say, even for leaders, for women of culture, one of the things is what is the dance that you have to have when it comes down to collaboration, to the not knowing and asking and staying in curiosity, asking the questions. I remember I had a senior leader who had no idea, I had coached this executive woman of culture. The senior leader had no idea of what her full dreams and wishes were. And so we had this conversation and I said, so what do you think this is for her? And he goes, well, I have no idea. I think it's this and this. And I said, well, I think there's an opportunity to ask the questions. And it never even phased him it didn't register, but that curiosity, sitting in curiosity of the not knowing, to then be able to, support in a courageous way, support any of the possibilities that this leader could enhance the organization with, because it's a passion of theirs. This is their, I think that's a really key piece as well when we talk about working collaboratively, bringing forward everyone and all of who they are into the workspaces, into the potential of work, of their ideas and the creativity that they can bring.
Yes, totally. And you're right. I mean, there's so many things that sort of come to mind. And I know I sort of mentioned this sort of collaboration piece, but, another important concept as such, talking about women of culture, or women in general, is this other concept of the wolf pack, which is interesting. It's the Abby Wambach. I don't know if you read, I mean, again, sort of, I love all my books, but it's a very tiny little book. And again, we sort of use the concept in here, but is to really be that, what she called the sort of real wolf, where women just, again, going back to the advocacy piece, they advocate for each other. In a way, and they learn to lead from the front, but also from the back, from left, from right. And this is a really beautiful story, actually, that sort of she shared, because she was one of the persons she was the person who scored the most number of goals, any human, either male or female, that she did. And for her very last match for the world championship, she was asked by her coach not to play, which was, if you think about where she was at the top of her career, to then what she calls the lead from the bench was huge. And this is a really important key concept, actually, that I think it's worth mentioning, is you've got to be able to lead from the bench as well as from the front. And that's what she said. If you can't lead from the bench, that, she will argue that you can lead from the field. Because you have to be able to lead from...
I love that. Yeah, from all different angles. And I think that that's important. That's us as a maturity as a leader. If you can lead from different spaces, if you can have power over, power with, if you can have that sense of, absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know the book, but I will pick it up. Thank you.
You'll read it in an hour. It's tiny. And actually, she's got a good TEDx. But yeah, I think that's the sort of thing. It's a beautiful way. So maybe for you, as to how do you intercept with your work of power with and power over, it's a great resource as such, because it's about you're either a leader everywhere, I think she says, or nowhere.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you. I love that. I always love a good reference. That's always important.
Yeah, and I always sort of remember, I think our own sort of, for us, our own master, our own coach is how you show up anywhere, you show up everywhere.
Everywhere, exactly. And everything is important, as Wendy Sorello says as well. And I think there is a lot. Alina, I just have to take a minute. I don't know what our timing is, but I want to applaud as I have watched you. You are a manifester of all manifestors. I've never had anyone in such a powerful state. So to watch you manifest and then be at choice when you do it now, I just think is so inspirational, because I know what you have in front of you. I know the world that's in front of you, that your book is in airports, that you've created this space in this world for yourself, and you are so very authentic in the process of doing it. I appreciate that. I admire that about you. So thank you.
Oh my God. I mean, I am now receiving it with all my heart and with all my everything. And it's thank you so much for that, Kanchan. And I'm holding the mirror. It's the same for me. I'm really inspired, and I appreciate you so much as a human being, as a woman of culture, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a leader, as everything there is on that spectrum. So thank you. And it's interesting, you were talking about giving and receiving. I mean, a few years back, my old self would have found this so very difficult to receive. I would have probably jumped and, I would have cut you off, and I would have just, went a different direction. So for me to breathe that in and receive it, it's big. So thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Even for the opportunity to actually receive it. So, I mean, we do have 1 more minute until we are at time. So I would love to, where would people find you, Kanchan, if they wanted to explore more this idea of working with women of cultures and their leaders?
LinkedIn is the only space. I don't do Instagram or Facebook or anything. So LinkedIn is my main space. The company that I founded is Capri Consulting with a K. So Capri Consulting is my website as well. Those are the two. It's very simple. And that said, I'm not, it is through connection, and like this, people can get a hold of me. So thank you.
Well, simplicity is the mother of sophistication. This is it's what we say no to in order to say yes to the big. So, LinkedIn is the platform of choice, and is probably the one to be in for leaders. So that's great. Thank you. Well, and I'm aware we are, what I will say out, in case for whatever reason we don't know because we're live on this platform, but if this wasn't the link that most people or anyone has joined us, we will make sure that we share it. I will make sure that you have because we definitely have it live and we have it recorded, so then we can share it in that shape or form. And we shall do it again anyway, Kanchan,
Perfect.
If for whatever reason, and even if it's just they say we had fun. So if it doesn't work for anything else but us sharing the recording, so be it. But we'll do it properly if we haven't this time. That's my promise to you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kanchan. Thank you.